let's be honest, managing all the software we use can sometimes feel like it's eating away at our wallets.
Yeah, totally.
All those subscriptions can really add up, but
Right.
what if there was another way?
Yeah.
A whole world of powerful tools without the price tag.
Like a whole universe of them.
Exactly. And you know what?
Yeah.
We're talking about open source software.
Open source, it's built on this idea that collaboration and shared knowledge can lead to some pretty amazing results.
Yeah.
Often rivaling or even surpassing those big-name paid apps.
Exactly. And we're going to take a deep dive today into a resource that honestly kind of blew my mind.
Okay.
It lists 36 categories of software where you can find awesome open source alternatives.
Wow.
36.
36?
You wouldn't believe it. There's even an open source alternative to Shopify.
Really?
Can you imagine having total control over your online store, like down to the very last detail?
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
That's what MedusaJS offers.
MedusaJS, huh? I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So what else is on this list?
Oh man, where do I even begin?
I mean, 36 categories, that's got to be a lot.
It's a lot. It's everything from managing social media and video conferencing to stuff like budgeting and even organizing your photos.
Wow, so there's really an open source alternative for just about everything we use daily.
Pretty much. And, for a while, I thought open source was just for like hardcore techies.
Yeah, I can see how you'd think that.
But then I came across this incredible project management tool called AppFlowy.
AppFlowy, okay.
Yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air compared to some of those pricier platforms. And it made me realize, like, wow, there's so much potential in the open source world.
So this resource really highlights how diverse the open source community is.
Definitely.
There are alternatives for almost every need, and often they offer a level of customization and control you just wouldn't find with paid software.
Absolutely. Okay, I got to share a few more categories that really caught my eye. So project management tools like AppFlowy and Plunka are awesome contenders if you love Notion and Trello, but maybe you're not thrilled about those ongoing subscription costs.
Yeah, I can see that.
Plus, you have complete control over your data, which is a big deal for a lot of people.
Definitely, data ownership is a key factor for many, especially with all the concerns around data privacy and security these days.
Absolutely. And for the security-conscious folks out there, let's talk authentication.
Okay.
You know how crucial it is to protect your online accounts?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, instead of relying on platforms like Auth, you can actually explore open-source alternatives like Hanko and Authentik.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they let you build super solid authentication systems right on your own servers, so you have complete control over your security setup.
Wow, that's a perfect example of how open source can really empower you to take ownership of your digital security.
Right.
It's not just about using the software, it's about understanding how it works and having the ability to tailor it to your specific needs.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking about software.
For sure. And it seems like there's so much to explore.
Oh, yeah. We're just scratching the surface here.
I'm excited to dive deeper.
Me too. Let's get into it. Okay, so we've seen some really cool examples, but maybe it's time to step back and really understand what makes open source software tick.
I think that's a great idea.
It's more than just finding free apps.
Exactly. Open source is really a whole different way of thinking about software development.
Okay.
It's built on these principles of transparency and collaboration.
So it's not just about saving money.
Right. It's not just about the cost.
Mm-hmm.
The real beauty of open source is the access it provides.
Okay.
Imagine being able to see the blueprint of the software you use every single day to understand exactly how it's made and even contribute to its development.
Wow.
That's what open source offers. The source code is freely available for anyone to view, modify, and distribute.
So it's like a global team effort.
Yeah, exactly. It's this constant work to make the software better.
And that can lead to some pretty awesome innovations.
It can, but we got to be real. Open source isn't perfect for everyone.
Okay.
There are trade-offs you have to think about.
Like, what are some of the potential downsides?
Well, one thing is people think open source means free, like totally free.
Right.
And while the software itself might be free to use, there can be costs associated with things like implementation or customization or even finding support.
So you might need some technical skills to get things running.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're used to having like a customer support line to call.
That makes sense.
Think of it like building your own house.
Yeah.
You have the freedom to design it however you want.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot more work and planning, and you need some expertise.
Right.
And if something goes wrong, you can't just call someone. You have to rely on the community for help.
So it's not just about finding a free alternative. You really have to consider your own needs and your technical abilities.
Absolutely. And before you just dive into a specific open source project, do your research.
Okay, what should we be looking for?
Look for signs of an active and responsive community.
Okay.
Make sure the software is updated regularly and see if there's good documentation available.
Okay. What about security?
That's a good question. Some people worry about using open source software because the code is out in the open.
Right.
And it's true, there are risks. While many open source projects have really good security, having the code publicly available means vulnerabilities could be exploited more easily if they're not addressed quickly.
So how do you know if an open source project is secure?
You have to do your homework, look into the project's history. Have there been any big security issues?
Okay.
Are there ways to report vulnerabilities, and how are they patched?
Right.
And how active is the community in finding and fixing issues?
So you're saying it's all about choosing wisely?
Exactly. You have to weigh the pros and cons and make sure that open source alternative fits your specific needs and your level of technical expertise.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm starting to see open source as more than just free software.
It's definitely a different philosophy.
It feels like you're in control more, you know? Like you're actually participating in the tech you use instead of just being a consumer.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
You're not just buying a product, you're joining a community
Yeah.
and contributing to a project
Yeah.
and shaping the tools you use.
So thinking about everything we've talked about today, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Why should they care about all this?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to choices. Open source gives you options.
Okay.
It lets you go beyond those big tech companies and all their subscriptions.
Right.
You can choose software that matches your values,
Like,
whether that's data privacy or cost effectiveness or even just the freedom to customize things.
it's about taking control of your digital life.
Exactly. You're not just stuck with whatever those big companies decide.
Right.
And that makes me think of a question for you.
Okay.
If you could build your ideal software setup from scratch, would you go with those familiar SaaS solutions? Or would you dive into the world of open source?
It's a good question.
What would influence your decision?
Well, this deep dive has definitely made me rethink my own software choices and what's important to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about exploring open source.
What is that?
It challenges how we think about software, who it's for.
Okay.
It reminds us that there are other options out there
Yeah,
and that we can choose the tools that work for us.
absolutely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into open source software alternatives.
It's been a great conversation.
I hope this has given you a new perspective on the world of software
Me too.
and maybe even inspired you to explore those amazing open source possibilities.
There's a whole universe out there.
So stay curious, keep learning, and you might just discover your next favorite tool in the open source universe.
You never know what you'll find.
Thanks for listening.
SIA has